our 21st century technology is supposed to be about critical thinking. And many times these devices short circuit that, and they give us the answer. And to me, that just doesn't really work.
You know, some of the concerns around the development of social skills, which I'm particularly concerned about, because as I mentioned at the first meeting, you know, we had the benefit of developing those skills as children, and then being introduced to computers versus just being thrown directly at computers. And I think that's important to be able to develop it, especially at younger ages.
I'm just going to ask, I mean, in some ways I always set up the kids to fail, where they come in, they have their devices, so they're you know, having new ways to learn things. If they leave here and they go to schools like Central, West, and Trinity, where you're not allowed to have any devices, so then what do you do? How do you access the knowledge base that you acquired, you know, say in college, to further your education in high school? Do we know if there are plans like this to, you know, at the high school level? You know, or is this just kind of an isolated, let's try it and free to be you and me and see where it goes?
This was actually one of the things I was thinking about with the forum, because there, you know, Bo was brought up in Oyster Creek or something, a couple other Oyster River. Brought up as a couple programs that do have, but a large number of school districts do not.
Right.
So my actual goal with this is not only just the Hooksett School District, but just all school districts. Actually, in New Hampshire, I think this is a valuable discussion to have so that we can start to introduce these things for even other school districts. Not that I want to run other school districts, I think we have enough here. But
one of the things that shocked me watching the presentation was when Matt said, like so many things, this is happening in higher education, and now we're going to bring it down. And I thought to myself, you know, okay, so it's in college, you know, and I'm not familiar with what these devices are, but wait a minute, as Bill said, you know, we're skipping high school, and we're going all the way to K with this, which really just blew me away. I assumed we were going to go middle school, you know, because I didn't consider buying my daughter a device until 5th or 6th grade. I mean, you know, so I'm just wondering why we went all the way down, you know, K-8 that this was going to happen. And you're right, are now they're going to go into high school, and they're going to probably have a much more restrictive policy to deal with. So again, I think I would have been much more on board with a pilot program here at Colley for maybe a rollout of the, you know, 6, 7, 8. But I don't really see it in the lower grades.
And I would love to see the parents and teachers more involved with the results of that. I thought it was great that one of the parents brought up, you know, a forum, like we were just discussing. Well, how do we collect all that data, either anecdotal or hard evidence, you know, so that the pilot was for some purpose? I mean, what were the results of that? Well, at the end of that, I think the only thing that was mentioned was they're going to ask kids what they thought.
What about the teachers? Did they get a say? Did the teachers get a say as to whether they thought it was a net benefit or net?
There's 3 surveys being conducted in 6 months on the pilot.
Okay. What happens if, you know, after a few?
This could potentially evolve into, okay, it's impossible to support all these different devices. We're going to have to come out with a standardized device that's issued to all kids. Well, as a parent, I love the idea that, you know, my kid is being provided more for their education. That's great. But also, as a taxpayer, you have to think about, okay, what's the return on investment? If you're going to issue standard issue devices, well, what did you get out of that? And was it the best investment? I mean, iPads are great, they're strong, whatever. They have a nice operating system, that kind of thing. But Android has a really great operating system. Some of those devices have just as much, if not more, capabilities. If you invest $150 in an Android 7-inch tablet, or $199 for the Amazon one versus $600+ for an Apple one, if you break a couple, you're still ahead of the game. Or you can issue one to each of the 3 students versus 1. So, you know, when was it used? Which devices were successful for that particular use, and who had access, who didn't. I think it's a really valuable bunch of data to collect, because it'll help parents, guide teachers as far as, what curriculum was successful for those particular devices. And also, if it does end up going down that road, the people at Hooksett can make a better decision as far as what they should buy.
Yeah, that's a good question, a good suggestion. But and the other thing too is I think we should also reflect on the meeting that we had here, because Matt said, unambiguously, that the argument of platform is over. Right? So it's over. It's mute. So the idea that we'd have to go to an Apple way or a Droid, iOS or an Android platform shouldn't be a factor in the decision. It should be only on cost. And
That's not true.
oh, you don't think
It's
so?
not true at all.
No.
I'm surprised you made that statement.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely not true. Like I said, the great example, it's a great resource, but the Hooksett library has that Overdrive Media, and I invite each of you to go there and look at the list of devices and operating systems and whatnot that are supported. Now, this is a standardized application to let you download ebooks and audiobooks, but the range of DRM, this format, you have to have an Adobe account for this one, and it runs on this one, but you can't get an audiobook on that one, or you can get an audiobook. It's 30 pages, and that's for one application. It's amazing. So that argument that decision is over, that is not true. That is so not true.
I think he was meaning in regards to the OS, on the OS level, not on the deeper portion of it.
Even on the OS level, I think the superintendent is in love with his iPad.
Yeah.
So he loves the Apple device, and that's great. It's a great device, but like I said, my own personal opinion is Apple's out on top because they started first. But I think Android's going to overtake. It's known that there'll be roughly 1 million apps in 2012. The prediction is about a 50-50 split. After that point, I think Android will actually surpass Apple.
Well,
In watching the video of the last meeting, superintendent's example of the classroom use totally threw me off. His example was they're studying the Civil War, and the teacher poses the question, what would have happened if the South had won? And someone can pull out their device and look up the answer and raise their hand and give the answer. My thinking is exactly the opposite, that if you've learned about the Civil War, you should then be able to extrapolate your opinion, because there is no real answer, because the South didn't win. And you should be able to say we would have been a more agricultural society, or maybe we would have had slavery longer, or some of these facts that you've learned. But when they look that up, they're finding a person's opinion maybe that wrote a book or has a website. Now,
Yeah,
I
because
would
it's still being debated that way.
Yeah, but I would argue if the question was how far is it to the moon, yes, you could look at there's a tangible number. Well, depending on, it varies, but there's a tangible number there to be found. So I was a little confused when he used that as an example of how it would happen.
I wasn't at the last meeting, so I didn't hear the presentation, and I didn't get a chance to watch the video.
well, there wasn't a privacy or security section of that presentation, so.
Okay,
So you're
so
good.
the number one would definitely be, are these devices going to be on the same network as the school?
That's
Because-
separate, yeah.
Okay, so they will be on a separate network?
Well,
Yeah. Let me just comment one thing about that. It's going to be a guest network. So it's not going to provide them any access to the printers or their own school folders. So I know it's an effort to isolate it from the network, but I also think it's going to diminish the effectiveness of it, because if a kid's on an iPad provided by the school and he writes something or whatever, my understanding is he's on the school network. He can save that or print it. If a person's on their own device, they're going to have to take it home, maybe print it at home or email it or something.
The network can be set up to support where the printer can sit on two networks. So that
Their description was it was
concerned
not.
about their devices being on the same network that grades are stored on. And I know when I was in 8th grade, those were temptations. So So there's that, and then also I'm not sure how they're going to enforce 3G and 4G wireless security, wireless, that not being enabled. That seems to be unenforceable outside of just if a student is caught on 3G.
Just a comment, we talked about this on the forum, that's going to be harder to catch now. Because currently, it's students not supposed to have their device out. So a teacher can zoom right in on it.
Yeah.
But with this, I think it's going to be virtually undetectable. And there is also the quick shutdown, or the quick, so I agree. And that's why I was asking you guys about apps that might be able to control.
Yeah, that
or
requires, support, recommendations, training for teachers, all
Yes,
sorts
you
of stuff.
take
You
it,
can do that
at
without.
this point, so.
Right.
Yeah.
It certainly won't be ready for next Monday.
So one other recommendation would be to change it to an internet-ready devices rather than just any device. I have a hard time understanding why a cell phone that can just make calls and send texts is going to be helpful from an academic standpoint. So that would be a recommendation, just to change that language.
Has there been any enhancements to the wireless networks here to accommodate all this additional traffic? Has there been any estimates or calculations or anything?
Well, that's a good budget question. There was $80,000 spent out of the fund balance last year to upgrade the wireless network. But in talking to the superintendent, we were told that had nothing to do with BYOD. It just had to be done. So the technical answer is nothing is being done for BYOD, but we have upgraded. I think Todd asked for a network map or some similar way to judge that, and
Was there any
no,
feedback?
no
so
information.
Historically, these subnets are typically very saturated as it is. I don't see how they're going to be accommodated in any, hundreds of other devices.
They didn't really want to enter into discussions about that. They basically say everything is all right, don't worry.
Improve it. I wouldn't trust but verify mode.
Right. Yep.
So then one other thing around security is, as far as the firewall is concerned, if they disallow encryption, then they won't be able to access most of the sites that require for you to log in. If they allow encryption, then they will be unable to monitor the traffic that's coming through. So that, again, is a little bit of an unenforceable.
Could you explain that a little more? Yeah, because you lost me a little on that.
Okay, so from a security standpoint, there's a protocol where it's HTTPS. You go into a site in order to log in so that the security credentials that you're sending back and forth, your login and your password, those are sent in such a way so that nobody else can see them. So then from then on, as long as you have a secure transmission, the same thing is true. Nobody can see what you're sending up or what you're pulling down, only between you and the server that you're communicating with.
Yeah, in corporate America, they handle this through a virtual private network. So ideally, you would have everyone come in and they all log into a VPN, which you have control over, and people can only go to certain places. It sounds like that type of thinking has been occurred.
I think it was Lucas, you mentioned proxy sites, that proxy sites kind of reconnect you to another site and maybe through to Facebook or something that you're not supposed to get. Are you confident that a firewall stops this?
No.
If the kids figure it out, I think it's gonna go like wildfire, that if you go to this link, you're gonna get Facebook or something during the day.
Yeah, and there's literally thousands, and they migrate of anonymous, they're called anonymizers. Basically, somebody sets it up, and it's a site that you go to that transmits information from another site. And there are people that have this stuff change every day, so that every day, people would have to figure out where to go and all those things.
A standard firewall won't stop that type of traffic. What you really need, and it won't be 100%, but what you really need is a product like we run at my office called WebSense that allows you to set up parameters, almost like profiles of what you're